नमः सवित्रे जगदेकचक्षुषे जगत्प्रसूतिस्थितिनाशहेतवे त्रयीमयाय त्रिगुणात्मधारिणे विरिञ्चि नारायणशङ्करात्मने. Hello everyone. So welcome to this month's hangout session. So every month we wanted to take one important aspect of Sanatana Dharma and discuss that. So because Magha Masa is coming up, right? So I thought that Suryārādhana, so why we worship Surya so much would be a topic that is appropriate. So obviously I'm sure you all have seen, right? We had Sankranti in early January, so that's a festival dedicated to Surya Bhagavan. Right, we celebrate his moving from the Dhanu Rashi to Makara Rashi, right? So he's leaving I actually forget what the English name for it is. He's coming from one zodiac to the next, right? So there are actually 12 zodiacs. So there's 12 Sankrantis that we have throughout the course of the year. So we call it Sankranti, but Sankranti is just like the technical term for the sun going from one zodiac to the next. So specifically it's Makara Sankranti, and we have such Sankrantis through the year. And interestingly enough, when these Sankrantis occur is also very interesting. So in the Chandramana system, right? So most of us, at least in South India, we follow the Chandramana system of time. So we count time based on the moon's movements, right? So the first day of the moon, the second day of the moon, all the way up to Purnima, to the full moon, and then back down to Amavasya, to the new moon. So there's this set of a lunar month. So from Amavasya to the next Amavasya, from one new moon to the next new moon. And then there's the Sauramana calendar, which is from the sun entering one zodiac to the sun re-entering that same zodiac is one solar year, one Sauramana Samvatsara. So I'm sure you all have noticed, right? So this last year we had two Ashvija Masas. We had a Nija Ashvija Masa and an Adhika Ashvija Masa. So what is this Adhika Masa, right? What is the concept of there being an extra month? So the way we know when it's an extra month is if two Sankrantis occur in the same, if two solar Sankrantis occur in the same lunar month, that month becomes an Adhika Masa. So usually one Chandramana Masa, so one lunar month, only has one Sankranti. So when there are two Sankrantis though, so when the sun's movement is such that from one Amavasya to the next Amavasya, the sun is crossing two zodiacs, we term that an Adhika Masa and we count it twice. So like this, the sun forms a vital part of how we count time. So that's why, the sun isn't just one of the Navagrahas. The sun isn't just, a planet that we observe. The sun is very much a devata. It is a divine being for us. And I'm not going to talk about the sun in terms of the devata, like what does it mean in Jyotishya, what's the devata like. But I thought more in terms of science and also more in terms of philosophy, why do we revere the sun so much, right? I'm sure you've all heard, right? So you've heard the word, his sun is called Pratyaksha Narayana, right? The Narayana that you see in front of your eyes. Especially this one shloka that I told in the beginning is one that we tell during Sandhya Vandana, and I'll talk about Sandhya Vandana in the end too, because that ties into the sun. So Namas Savitre, so Namaskaram to Savita, or the Savitra Devata. So this Savita is of course the same Savita that we also have in the Gayatri mantra, right? The Savitar Bhargaha, the Tejas of Savita. So Savita these days is usually translated as the sun when you translate it to English. But in the Veda Bhashya, if you look, for Savita they write Sarvajivantaryami Chodayita Ishvara. So Savita there means the Ishvara within who drives us. So although the name Savita refers to the Devata, the God within us that runs this otherwise inert machinery, we worship that Devata not within us, but sitting 94 million miles away in space. So this is such a beautiful thing to contemplate, right? So in Upanishad we have this one thing, Sayaschayam Purushe, Yascha Savaditye Sa Ekaha, Saya Evam Vita Asmal Lokat Pretya. So that which is within this Purusha is that which is within Aditya, not my name Aditya, the sun Aditya, Yascha Sav Aditya. So whatever is within this person Aditya is within Aditya, who is, the sun. And these two are one, Sa Ekaha. And someone who knows that what happens, saya evam vita asmal lokat pretya, having left this world, it goes into etam annamayam atman upasankramati, etam manomayam atman upasankramati. He basically goes through the panchakoshas, he leaves those behind and merges with Brahman. So we have taken the concept of understanding Surya as our true self and equate it to basically getting moksha. So that is the role that the sun can play in in our lives. So in that shloka, Jagadeka Chakshushe is the next word. So after Savita, Jagadeka Chakshushe, he is the eye of the world. So anything that is seen in this world is seen with his light, right? So whenever you need to see anything, it's pretty straightforward. The rays bounce into your eyes to the object, back from the object to your eyes, and you see, right? The retina flips it upside down, you see the right side up image, and that's how you see. So all light that we get in this world comes from him. This is a very superficial meaning, right? If we want a light, we can just turn on a lamp or something. Like, we don't have to worship, a giant ball of gas, however many million miles away, because we need light. So actually, the Sringeri Acharya Chandrasekhara Bharati Swami, he said there's a very nice quote. Actually, in retrospect, I should have had it to read out. But the quote went along the lines of, for those who cannot conceive of a higher notion, the sun is a ball of gas. For those who can conceive of something higher, the sun is a force that runs this world. For those that can look beyond the physical nature of the sun and look into its more spiritual nature, the sun is none other than the Ishvara that is within us. So basically, he took the Vedic statement that I just made and kind of condensed it into a more understandable sentence. So anything that is seen in this world is seen through Surya. How is that? Everything that we perceive in this world is based on two dimensions, which are space and time, right? Anything that we see, anything that we experience, even our thoughts exist in space and time, right? Our thoughts may not exist in space, but they exist in a time. So now if we think about which of these two is of the greater scope, is space greater or time greater? Right? If we think about this, everything is measured in space and time, right? Space is the 3 dimensions, so length, width, depth, and time is the 4th dimension, so where things progress relative to a more constant object. Which of these is more all-encompassing though? If you think about this, it is very obvious that time is more broad than spaces, because you can measure a given point in space based on time, right? You cannot measure time in space. How can you measure time with space? But you can measure space with time. If you take a particular longitude and latitude, this is what this place looked like at 12 a.m. This is what this place looked like at 1 a.m. This is what it looked like the next day. This is what it looked like the next year. So a point in space can be measured in time, right? And that's why we have all of those terrible derivatives in calculus, because you have a thing in space and you keep going dt, and you have to do more and more derivatives, and you basically measure where the particle is based on time, how fast it's going based on time, whether it's going faster based on time. Calculus also ties back to Vedanta. You may not know it now, but everything will in the end come back to this. Even we measure space based on time. So at the end of the day, outside of Paramatma, time is what maps this world. Time is what runs this world. Time is what keeps things going. Time is what enables this cosmos to exist in a balance. Things need to happen at the right time, in the right way, right? So the Surya Bhagavan is what we use to relate ourselves to time, right? Everything we measure is, again, based on two things. There are two ways that we measure things in, either based on Surya or based on ourselves. You all have heard the term Nimesha, right? In Telugu we say Oka Nimisha Untanu. That is Nimisha, or Nimesha means a blink of the eye. So we measure things either in terms of the individual. So the blink of an eye that is not based on anything external. That's based on the individual. On the other hand, though, we measure things in days, seconds, hours. This time is all based on what? How do we know how far we have moved in the spectrum of time, in the fabric of time-space? Based on Surya's movements, right? So Kala Nimeshah Kashtha Aschaho Ratrascha Sarvashah Ardhamasa Masa Ratavas Samvatsarascha Kalpantam is what Arunam says. Not Arunam, Mahanaranam says. So from Kala is a 16th of a blink of an eye. So all of that up to Ardhamasa Masa Ratavas Samvatsara, so up to a year. All of these measures are based on what? Surya. So when we have someone that is running time and thereby is running space, we give him the qualities of Ishvara, or not really we give him because we can't really give him anything, but we ascribe the qualities of Ishvara to that entity. And what is the qualities of Ishvara? Remember, Ishvara does not mean Shiva, at least in Vedanta. For us, the definition of Ishvara is very simple. Yato va imani bhutani jayante, yena jatani jivanti, yat prayanti abhisamvishanti. That from which the cosmos arises, that due to which this cosmos is in homeostasis, is sustained, and that into which it dissolves is Ishvara. So whenever anyone says Ishvara to you, this is the definition that needs to immediately jump to mind. So all of this came from somewhere. All of this is staying situated on some, stable platform, not a physical platform, right? But there needs to be some principle based on which things work properly. And at the end of the day, this will all dissolve back into its cause, where it came from. So that is Ishvara. So because time runs all of this, right? Everything is born from a certain time. Everything's birth date exists within time. And then based on time, it exists at some point in time. And when it dissolves into time, which is why in Telugu we have a really nice phrase. We say, Kalagarbhanlo kalisipoyindi. Whenever something is, way back in history, we say, Kalagarbhanlo kalisipoyindi. What? It has been dissolved into the depths of time because the thing has now been relegated to the past. It only exists in a time. It no longer exists in a space, right? If we have a great-great-great-grandfather, yes, we say he lives in India, but his existence is more marked by the fact that he lived in the 1800s or the 1500s or something. So the spectrum of time is something that gives rise to, sustains, and dissolves into itself everything that this is in this world. So because Surya is our way of measuring that time, because Surya is the holder of that time for us, we treat him as Ishvara. And not only that, life on earth as we know it is based on two things. It is based on water and the sun. And again, even between those two, which one is more important? The sun. Because there are many planets that have water, but only this planet has life because we are the right distance from the sun. The sun does not heat us up so much that the water stays water vapor. And the sun is not so far away like it is from, Enceladus, Saturn's moon, where, the caps are frozen and it's only ice. Ice cannot sustain life, neither can vapor. We need liquid water. That's what Earth has, right? So out of the two things that sustain life, Earth or sun and water, the sun is what gives us water, which is why we say, right? Naditya hridayam nashayatyesha vaibhutam tatheva srijati prabhu payatyesha tapatyesha varashatyesha gabhastibhihi. Payatyesha, he protects us. How? Tapati, he shines, he burns, he heats. And then he takes the water up, and then varashatyesha, he rains it back down. So without the sun, the water cycle stagnates, right? The water will come down from the clouds and it'll, either precipitate and go into the ocean or it'll become groundwater and stay in the ground. But there will be no recycling, right? Everything in the end will become salt water and we'll have to boil water if we want clear water, right? So the reason why we have life as we know it right now is from the sun. And remember, for us, life is not some biological phenomenon. Right? There is this aspect of Chaitanya. There is a consciousness that enlivens the otherwise inert machinery. And we get that from what? Who gives us this consciousness? Who gives us the ability to live, right? So yes, the mother and father will birth a living child, but where does that child get its life from, right? Where is the prana sustained from? The obvious simple answer again becomes the sun. Whatever we eat, whether we are vegetarian or non-vegetarian, at the end of the day, regardless, you get your energy from the sun. There is no there is no surprise in that, right? You can trace every food chain back to the sun. So the sun gives it to plant life. The sun's energy is transferred to plant life. The chlorophyll makes it into plant growth. Then the plants are eaten by herbivores. Herbivores are eaten by carnivores, right? And the thing is, actually, the farther down you go this track, the more diluted that energy becomes, which is why we say that vegetarian diets are more sattvic than non-vegetarian diets. The reason why we say that is because of that. The farther you get from the source of the energy, the more diluted it becomes, right? So it is because of the sun that we have sustenance. Our life stays alive. The Chaitanya that we have been given remains within us. Chaitanya is not going to go anywhere, right? We do not have control of consciousness. But the fact that we are able to use that consciousness to enjoy our faculties, right? If we go to a movie, if we're eating something good, if we're listening to good music, we are in full possession of our faculties because of that prana being sustained, and that happens because of Surya. Which is why Surya is prayed to as the devata of the Indriyas. So the Indriyas and the Buddhi, remember, is also an Indriya. It is the Antarindriya, it is the inner organ. Whereas the hands, feet, nose, eyes are all external organs of perception. The Antahkarana, so the mind, the intellect, are the internal organs of perception. So Surya is the Adhidevata for all of these. Meaning Surya is the presiding deity for all senses that we have, including the mind. Which is why we say, Dhiyo yonaf prachodayat, may that spur on our mind, our mental processes. What is that? What is spurring them on? Savituhu varenyam bhargaha, devasya savituhu varenyam bhargaha, devasya savituhu. So of the effulgent Surya, his tejas, his bhargas, may that spur on our mental processes. Why? Because of this. This is why everything we get in one way or another is traced back to Surya. So this is one aspect of Surya. More socially, I guess, not socially because nothing was put in place for the sake of society, right? They gave us truths and encapsulated them for society. But if we look at this another way, these forms of devatas that we have, we've talked about this before, right? Forms of devatas that we have, these are not arbitrary forms, right? Like Lalita Devi doesn't look the way that she looks because someone decided that's what they want her to look at. So this Maharshi doing tapas tapped into some throb of the universe, and that throb manifests. That concept manifests as a devata. So everything in this universe has something conscious that enlivens it. We call that conscious thing a devata, and that's what we pray to whenever we need that thing to work. So when a Maharshi was doing tapas, let's say he needed to envision Maya. So Maya appeared to him as Lalita, so wearing a red sari with the moon on her head, with 4 arms, with the sugarcane bow and the 5 arrows, the pasha and ankusha in the hands. Another Maharshi did tapas, and he did tapas and he saw the form of Shiva. So the matted locks, again the moon, the third eye, an elephant skin wrapped around him, white trishula, bhasma, all of that he saw. Another Maharshi did tapas, he saw the form of Ganapati, elephant head, pot belly, 4 arms, and all of this. But while these devatas, you see them in very different forms, they all have one thing in common, and that is they are all worshipped via the sun. If you see, all devatas have 2 things in common. They will be worshipped as Omkara, and they will be worshipped as the sun. So Vaishnavas, Shaivas, and Shaktas, they can argue. They'll say Devi is the greatest, Vishnu is the greatest, Shiva is the greatest. They'll argue about all of that. But none of them have any doubt in the fact that their devata is being worshipped as Surya, and their devata is being worshipped as Omkara. If you notice, every mantra will come from Omkara. The Omkara will, for like any mantra for devata, if you look at the backstory, it'll say it came from Omkara, or that devata manifested as Omkara. The same thing we will see for the sun. Namah Shivaya Sambhaya Sagunaya Adi Vihetave Rudraya Vishnave Tubhyam Brahmane Surya Murtaye. Shiva is worshipped as sun. And then we have Surya Narayana. Of course, the Narayana is the very commonly associated with the Surya. In Lalita Sahasranama, you have Bhanu Mandala Madhyastha, right? One who is seated in the orb, in the disk of the sun, one who is the Surya Antaryami. And even in the Nirguna standpoint, there is this thing in Chandogya Upanishad called Antaraditya Vidya. So this is a very beautiful part of the Upanishad. So it describes, the Upasanas in the Upanishad are very special. They don't tell us forms of devatas to meditate on, or at least the forms that they give us are not the devatas that we now usually pray to in vogue. So they'll say in the sun there is a devata who is Hiranya Shmashruhu, Hiranyakeshaha, Apranakhat, Sarveva Suvarnaha. He has golden, facial hair, golden, nails. Basically it says Apranakhat. From the tip of his hair to the bottom of his toenail, everything is gold. So basically think of a golden man. And that Purusha is seated within the Surya Bimba. So this is Antaraditya Vidya. So they say do Upasana of that. And then, not right after, but very shortly after follows Antarakshi Vidya, or it's called just Akshi Vidya. So then it says, in the center of the eye, specifically the part of the eye that things are perceived through, imagine one person there. He is also gold from head to toe, and he's also sitting there. And then what Upanishad basically hints at is that Devata that is within the eye allowing you to see is the Devata that is within the sun giving you light. So all Devatas at the end of the day are worshipped through Surya Bhagavan, right? So Surya Bhagavan basically forms a focal common point for all walks of life to see Bhagavan.